I want to talk about a little bit, this is kind of a theme we've hit on, here at Born Primitive, just from a mentality standpoint, but also the podcast, and it's entitlement. And, for me, it drives me nuts. I grew up in Indiana, went to a public high school, worked my butt off, mowed lawns, into my early 20s. I got a degree at Yale. I earned it. I played football. Even after I had a Yale degree, I was mowing lawns, as a 25-year-old, being scrappy. So like, I've always had that underdog mentality because of how I was raised. And now that I run a successful business, I hear murmurs of must be nice, right? And this and that. That just absolutely drives me nuts. Because these people, those are the people that have no idea what it takes. And Bedros, what it takes. You've been down that road, much more than I have. But to be, burning the candle at both ends for 10 years with a, 7% chance of success at the end of it, starting a business from nothing, while having a full-time job and a very demanding job and, stressful job. I have a little bit of resentment, if I'm not going to lie, about those people that say that. And when I look at our country and the mentality that's getting pushed, I see an erosion of the hungriest man eats mentality, and it's being replaced with victim mentality. And hey, you are a victim, so you should believe that. And I think the most infuriating thing is that by someone believing they are a victim, it completely cripples their ability to get after it and achieve their own the things in their life, because you subscribe to it and now you have a defeatist attitude as if it's a predetermined outcome, right? And it just drives me nuts. And I know a lot of the stuff you talk about is kind of around this theme. So as you look at America right now, and of course men and women, but I'm kind of calling out the men here. What are we doing wrong? How is this kind of infection creeping into our society? And thank God we have kind of leaders like you that are the counterculture to that and the cut against the grain. But I'm seeing that is can we reverse this, right? And to use an extreme example, if we ever have to fight another world conflict, are the men today wired like our grandfathers were in the 40s? Like, I know there's hitters out there. Like my buddy, like I know we can find some hitters. You go into God's country in the Midwest and the South, like we'll sign up in 2 seconds. We'll fight a freaking war, right? But as a whole, like legitimately, have we lost some of that? I know that's an extreme example. Like the odds of that happening where we're actually like grading men on our ability to fight, world conflict is I would hope low, but it is a possibility. Sure. But I always go to that, if we had to fight, do the men, contain the DNA that our grandfathers did to storm a beach, 6,600 ships, D-Day, in a machine gun fire, first line of cover, 300 yards away, machine gun nests everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, could we do that? Right? I don't know. So kind of a loaded question, but what is your take on all of this? What can we do as kind of Americans to get back to empowering people to believe that they can control their own destiny? You can get after it. The world owes you nothing. The world doesn't meet you halfway. You got to go out there and get it.
Agreed. So listen, I've got a view that I think you might agree with, and I'm pretty sure you will. I believe World War III. So everything you just said was tested. And if the question is, do men today have what our grandfathers did to storm the beaches, right? What our the men in World War II had to storm the beaches, knowing that there's imminent death at the highest rate. No, men don't have that today. That doesn't mean that our country's lost. That doesn't mean that we can't win our country back. However, I believe World War III was launched and waged March 16th, 2020, right around when the pandemic kicked off. I use March 16th, 2020 because that was the day that I went live on a Facebook private group to our Fit Body Bootcamp franchise owners. And I said, guys, there's this pandemic, this virus out of Wuhan. A pig and a bat had nasty sex, and some virus is the byproduct of it. And they say in 2 weeks we can flatten the curve. Since we run a group training program, I want you guys to shut down for 2 weeks. Now, that was the orders that I gave to all of our franchisees across the US and Canada. But being the son of a former communist, right when the camera turned off, I turned to Bryce, who was my VP at the time, now my CEO. I'm like, hey, plan for 90 days of at-home workout videos to do in case this thing continues. Because knowing how the government lies contorts the truth, creates false narratives, there could be a chance that this 2-week could extend. So as it did, we did not step up as men. We did not. I went on Fox News 9 times and spoke the truth about the attack on our country, the attack on our Constitution, the divisiveness that's taking place, that the opposition is big government who's funded by the military-industrial complex, pharmaceuticals, and the food corporations that are trying to kill us, and that this is what's happening right now. And why is it that we can go lick doorknobs at Walmart and Target, but we can't go work out in a gym because we have to maintain social distancing, which you guys know that whole Fauci 6 feet social distancing thing was a whole scam anyway. It just came out 2 or 3 weeks ago that was some arbitrary number they pulled out of their ass. So World War III was waged on us. It just wasn't waged like how wars typically are with missiles and guns and invasions. It was literally a psyop war that we are going to oppress you. And before that, and Bear, guys, I know you guys will attest to this. I've got enough friends in the military that explain to me what happens, that we soften a target before we go in, right? Whether it's softening them through taking down their power grid or through dropping leaflets and letting them know what their own government is doing to them, et cetera. But we soften up a target. The target had been softening up. The fucking country of men here in the United States were being softened up for an entire decade before 2020. And we saw that happening. And, if there was a ground zero for that, it was probably Married with Children, Al Bundy, where the dopey dad can't figure anything out, but for some reason that was okay. Then Homer Simpson, every TV show where the woman knew exactly what to do and was going to save the day, and the guy was dopey and he couldn't figure out his head from his ass. That was conditioning us in eroding masculinity, eroding what men stand for, the ability to have strength, honor, courage, and mastery. And so then, a decade later, March 16th, 2020, they waged war, World War III on us, and they proved that we were not willing to storm the beaches, if you will, by standing. Every motherfucker has social media. I don't care if you have 10 followers or 10 million followers. Say something if you feel something. Why is it that I've got to be on Fox News and my friends in Hollywood who are actors, like fucking actors in big time movies, secretly texting me on my phone saying, man, I can't say this out loud, but thank you for saying that on Fox News. Motherfucker, who gives a shit about your career in Hollywood right now? Our country is being brought down to its knees. We're now 90 days into the pandemic. And it just breaks my heart, man, that people that were born here don't have the same desire to protect the constitutional fiber of our great country than people like me that came as an immigrant that have seen something else. Obviously, you guys being from the military being very different, but that's a small percentage of the population. I think every single young American needs to go out and serve. Every single young American needs to learn everything that I had to learn to become a citizen of this country, that I had to sign the paperwork that said that if we go to war, I swear to protect the Constitution and I will be one of the first to go. Fuck it, man. I came to this country. This country's been good to me. Why wouldn't I serve this country? But we are sitting here watching the literally dumbification, destruction, and division of men and masculinity and everything that a man has, ambition, drive, strength, honor, courage, is being told that it's toxic. Bro, that is factory installed in you. That is not toxic. That is God-given. Your creator put that in you to be able to create the power lines, to create highways for hundreds of miles across this country, to create an airplane. Some motherfucker came up with the idea that we can get in a tube with wings and fly across the world. It was a dude who had this vision because he wanted to be forever remembered when he dies. Like, we raise monuments to ourselves. There's a reason men do what they do, but they told us everything about that is toxic. That is how they softened us up, and then they attacked us on March 16th, 2020, and then they continue this erosion. But I do believe there is hope because now, the unfortunate part is these fucking retarded men, the pendulum has swung so far this way that now they're like, oh, you know what? Looks like the Fauci thing, the 6 foot thing was false. And looks like your 18th version of the virus thing. Maybe it doesn't help after all. All these young men are dying of myocardial whatever. Yeah, motherfucker, it was all a scam. And so at some point, by the time they're figuring this out, when Joe Rogan was talking about it, when everyone was talking about it, but here's the good news. The pendulum will swing back if we make the right decision this November. If we don't, because we get emotionally worked up again, orange man bad, retarded old man who's senile good, we will once again catapult this great country into a further erosion, which is what the opposition wants, by the way. If the three of us here were like, we're going to gather all the men that we know, and then we're going to march north and we're going to invade Canada, let's face it, guys, if we're trying to take over Canada, we're not worried about the women and children. We're not worried about the elderly. We're only worried about one thing when we invade Canada, and that is the able-bodied men. So if all of a sudden Bear's like, whoa, listen, as someone who's got lots of experience in the military, before we cross that border, let's spend a couple years softening the hearts and minds of these men, making them gelatinous and weak and dependent. And then we don't have to go in there and fight them, fellas. We just go in there and take whatever we want. That is exactly what has been happening. This is why the attack is not on women and children. The attack is not on the elderly. The attack is on able-bodied men. And what better way to take able-bodied men who have to come together as a community to kill the Brontosaurus, to fight the opposing tribe when we were cavemen, is to separate them, divide them through people that want the vaccine, don't want the vaccine, black versus white, Israel versus Palestine, Ukraine versus Soviet Union. We will divide men so much that we just become dumb and dopey and go, well, maybe Bear and Tony got this, because I certainly don't know what to do. But the pendulum will swing back. But why did it have to swing this far in the first place? I have no idea.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for me from the pandemic that, is infuriating is it was an unprecedented thing, right? And we've talked about this before, but there's a scientific method, right? You take all the information, you get all the experts, and you allow that data to be contested, and you know what I mean? You poke holes in it, this is like the biggest kind of most critical scientific process in our lives, at least, right? And they were not allowing dissent into the conversation, right? Because they had the predetermined outcome of this is what we're doing. So, these guys with PhDs from Stanford and Harvard were chiming in, hey, wait a second, I have some credibility here. I'm not seeing it that way. They were outcasted and canceled. And that to me is the biggest danger, whether, you agree with what Bedros just said or not. You know what I mean? Like, we all cannot argue that squashing scientific debate in the most pivotal moment in our history, we should never allow that to happen ever again. That's one thing we should learn from that. And you can't, discount when there are billions of dollars that could be made off of that primary narrative winning. What is the actual motive for it being pushed, right? And that's not a conspiracy theory anymore, right? If you're mandating things, it's hopefully if this ever happens again, we can be a little bit more skeptical of any mainstream narrative that's getting pushed. And I would argue anytime there's a mainstream narrative that's being pushed where any dissent is not allowed, that should be our biggest red flag right there. And what I think is really cool is you coming from a communist country, and there's so many like you. It's like you see these people in Southern Florida that came from like communist Cuba, right? And they see it and they're yelling up and down like, you idiot Americans, like, we've seen this. And we're all like, oh, what do you mean? And it's like your rights are slowly getting eroded. And it's, guys, this is how it happens. Like, these people live this. You know what I mean? Well, and it's, we need to just be more skeptical, and it's okay to but you get canceled, you get labeled this. And, even our like third podcast we ever did, we had jumped to the number 23 in the business charts. It was awesome. We had passed all these prominent podcasts, and we were all high-fiving, and we talked about COVID in one of them. And all we talked about was how we should have embraced fitness as a way to combat this, right? And not shots and all this. And we weren't even disputing anything I would say controversial. And, all the bells and whistles at Spotify went off, and they pulled our charting data. They told us from the charts. They're still not sending us charting data to this day, just because we talked about it. And it's like, guys, if we're ever in that environment, that should be an alarm for all of us, whether you agree with it or not. If you happen to agree with it, obviously it helps your position, because then people like us can't be as loud. But it's the theme. That's the erosion of freedom at its core, and that's what our ancestors freaking fought for.